Uncle Steve reminding everybody that he's got the deepest pockets in the sport. Perhaps Kyle Tucker is going to be the magic trick that the Mets pull off this season. Welcome back to the Bleav in Mets pod. Chris and Jack with you talking all things New York Mets. And Jack, we scheduled an episode to be recorded today. We did not anticipate discussing the Mets throwing $50 million a season towards Kyle Tucker. How are you, my friend?
Chris, I'm feeling a lot more optimistic about the state of the New York Mets, or at least the potential state of the New York Mets since we last spoke. And I think it's because not only did we hear a little bit about the Kyle Tucker news, but we heard from David Stearns today as well, earlier speaking to members of the media, kind of giving us some kind of assurances that this is not the final product that the Mets plan to roll out in 2026. There are things going on behind the scenes, and Kyle Tucker obviously being the biggest item on the to-do list, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, I want to get to whether or not this 3 or 4 year deal that the Mets have apparently put in front of Kyle Tucker for a $50 million AAV is something that actually could get signed by Kyle Tucker. But the most interesting thing to me is since David Stearns became the president of baseball operations for the New York Mets, things don't normally leak from inside the walls of the Mets. And so when this leaks today that the Mets have offered Kyle Tucker a $50 million AAV, two thoughts entered my mind. I wonder if they entered your mind as well. One, this is coming from the agent side to continue to draw up the offers from the Blue Jays and Dodgers, the two teams that we know are also competing with the Mets in a pursuit of Kyle Tucker. But I also wonder if this is potentially coming from the Mets side of things to show the fan base like, hey, we are trying to go big game hunting this offseason. And this would kind of be proof that the pressure and the noise, I don't want to say is getting to David Stearns a little bit, but that he feels the pressure to at least leak it to the media that, hey, we are willing to spend Uncle Steve's money and give a $50 million AAV. What would that be? The third highest position player AAV in the sport? If you take Ohtani out?
Yep.
I mean, you take out Ohtani at 70 plus whatever his is. I think it's like 71. Judge is up there, Soto is up there, and Tucker would slot in somewhere amongst that group. So those two thoughts entered my mind. Could be from the agent to drum up the offers, or this could be the Mets leaking this to kind of send the fan base a small, subtle little message of, hey, we're trying over here.
Yeah, I think there's a really good chance of either one. I really, when I read it, I kind of thought more of the latter option, it being something from the Mets side of things, because David Stearns said earlier today in his media availability that he has heard plenty of the comments from fans. He's heard comments from other teams saying things about the Mets defense, not necessarily about the offseason, but about how the Mets still needed to build up their 2026 roster to be a lot more ready to contend. And I thought Steve Gelbs from SNY made a funny point when he kind of put out his video reacting to Stearns' comments earlier today. And he was like, David Stearns grew up a Mets fan, so he's not just hearing about the state of the Mets roster and complaints from any old outside fan. He's going home for the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever he celebrates, and he's hearing it from his family at home. David, why aren't the Mets doing anything this offseason? Why aren't the Mets making the big signings that they need to do to compete in 2026? Why does the rotation still look like it does? Why does the lineup now no longer have Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo, and the pitching staff no longer has Edwin Diaz? What are you going to do about it? And I think this leak coming out today about Kyle Tucker and the high AAV short-term contract thing is both a sign that the Mets are going to do something. They're going to make use of Steve Cohen's deep pockets, and it's a proof to fans and analysts that they're in the market for some of the bigger, they're big game hunting this offseason. They're not just going after adding on the margins with adding Marcus Simeons of the world, Luke Weavers, and Devin Williams to the bullpen. They're trying to make a run at one of the top free agents still in the market as far as hitters.
Yeah, and listen, Kyle Tucker is still a clunky fit, and I certainly would have my fair share of questions if/when Kyle Tucker ends up becoming a New York Met and accepts this deal. But we have long said that where the Mets will be able to thrive more so than any other team is in their willingness on a short-term AAV to go to a place that other teams aren't willing to go to dollar-wise. And this is where the Mets can be the kings of this. Like, they can own this subset of the market, combining David Stearns' philosophy of, I don't want to give long-term deals to guys that are 29, 30 years old, on the wrong side of 30, or starting pitchers, with the ability of Steve Cohen to dig into those pockets and dole out a lot of cash, right? That feels like a perfect combination of the way the two want to operate in baseball in 2026. And again, when this leaked today, I thought to myself, all right, three-year deal, 4-year deal, you're talking 3/150, 4/200. If you're Kyle Tucker, it's really hard because certainly the Mets will be offering opt-outs in this deal, whether it's after the first year or second year. And my guess would be that it will be after the second year that the Mets want to get at least some type of certainty in the short term for how long they'll have Kyle Tucker. But they'll definitely have opt-outs in the deal. There'll certainly be a lot of money up front in terms of a signing bonus to entice Tucker to take the short-term deal. And then it gives Tucker the ability to reevaluate, because I was thinking about this today, Jack. If he signed a 3-year, $50 million AAV deal, so let's put him in the ballpark of 3 years, $150 million, with an opt-out after 2 seasons. And let's just say, for argument's sake, that he plays out the 3 seasons in New York and gets $150 million. He will then hit free agency. He's 28 right now? He'll hit free agency at 31, 32 years old, and could maybe cash in on another 3-year deal, maybe a 4 or a 5-year deal. If he got a deal right now from Toronto, we know the Mets are offering a $50 million AAV. The other teams that are offering longer term certainly aren't going to 50.
No,
Are they going
yeah.
to 42? Are they going to 45? Let's call it $42 million, right, for the sake of arguments. If he signed right now a 7-year deal for $42 million, I pulled out my trusty calculator here on the computer, he's getting $294 million. If you minus the $150 that he's going to make from the Mets over 3 seasons, that means on his next deal, he would need $144 million to make up the quote-unquote loss of taking a short-term deal. A 31-year-old Kyle Tucker is making $144 million on his next deal, whether it's 3 years or 4 years. A 4-year, $144 million deal would give him an AAV of 36. He would be taking a pay cut from what he made on a $42 million AAV. And that would get him to the same number that a long-term deal from Toronto would, because they feel like the only team that's willing to go to a long-term, would get him. So financially, the Mets are almost getting themselves to a place where it's going to be hard to say no to them if money is factor numero uno, and we know that's how these players keep score. Getting to a $50 million AAV is going to make up for whatever is lost in this, because it's going to, on the back end, mean he needs to get a $36 million AAV to make up what he could potentially lose on a long-term deal. It's just going to make too much sense. And I went from thinking it was Bellinger or bust for the Mets on the position player side to now thinking they have a greater than 50% chance of landing Kyle Tucker.
I'm with you. I think that's a really interesting way of breaking it down. I didn't think about the way that the future would project for Tucker after this contract plays itself out, whether it's 1 or 2 years with opt-outs, whether it's 3 years if he plays out 3 years, whether it's 4 years if the Mets are willing to go further on him than any free agent hitter besides Juan Soto so far under David Stearns' regime. I think also, too, like, the fact that he's only 28 years old is a significant factor here because, like you mentioned, a 3-year deal, he's hitting the market again at age 31. And that's a way that, an age that we're seeing right now, hitters are getting 5, 6, 7-year deals already at age 31. And so Tucker is going to be getting something of a head start on both rounds of free agency, I guess, or like the long-term outlook of his career earnings by getting this much higher AAV shorter term deal while still being able to hit the market and capitalize on what we hope are 3 really strong years in New York when he gets to 31 years old and still has plenty of years ahead of him based on the way his bat projects long term. We broke down kind of exactly the player that he is and why he projects well for the Mets lineup. He's a guy that, similar to Soto, has the ability to recognize the strike zone to walk, and that's the sort of thing that will project well in the long term and earn him another payday, whether that's 2, 3, 4 years in the future.
And they're not the same player. But at 32 years old, Kyle Schwarber just got 5 years, $150 million. So if Kyle Tucker accepts right now 3,150 from the Mets and gets 5,150, he's going to get 8,300 over the lifetime of those two contracts. And I don't think there's a team right now that would put 8,300 in front of him. Like today, as we sit here, I don't think Toronto is going 8,300.
I think it would have happened if something that long term would have already been on the table, or that high AAV at that term. Like Tucker would have already taken that deal, I think.
And that's assuming he plays out all 3 years. I would bet that there's an opt-out after either the first or second year to allow him to reevaluate things in free agency. And, if you're Tucker, and I'm not trying to be, Mets guy here, who, saying, hey, Kyle Tucker, why don't you come to the New York Mets? But if you're Kyle Tucker and you know that there's going to be a new CBA in, 14 months, you take the 3-year deal, you build in the opt-outs, and then you can see the way the financials of the sport are going. And if money's going crazy, or the expectation is money's going to go crazy in 2027 after the new CBA is put into place, you can position yourself to play 26 and 27 for the New York Mets. And then in that first offseason, when the new CBA gets put into place, you can be right there to capitalize on that fresh cash that everyone is going to maybe be hoarding over the next 2 seasons. Again, I don't know if teams are going to do that. I don't know what the next CBA is going to look like, but I do wonder if that weighs on everybody's mind. There's the argument to lock it in now, get the 7-8 year deal, get the $250, $300 million and not worry about it. But then there's also the argument of, if I can lock in a ton of money right now, and $150 million is a ton of money, if I can lock in maybe 50% of what a long-term deal could be for me, while also keeping my options open to evaluate if the market dynamics change, for a 28-year-old, that might make a ton of sense. And it could give him the flexibility to get it the 8,300 or however much he was anticipating getting this offseason just over the lifetime of 2 contracts. And for the Mets, I mean, this is perfect. This is what you have Steve Cohen for, to do exactly this, to throw just a stupid number, right? You go in for that job interview and you ask for the moon, you throw that stupid number across the table. That's what the Mets are doing right now. They are sliding this number across the table. And I hope that today's news stops any conversation about Steve Cohen and David Stearns wanting to win. Like, I hope it stops the conversation of, David Stearns just trying to do it like he did in Milwaukee, just trying to win on the margins, just trying to, win it with a low payroll. No, when David Stearns senses opportunity, and this is an opportunity, he is going to strike. He is going to look for these types of market inefficiencies where, okay, the Toronto Blue Jays may be offering 8 years, but I'm offering maybe the best of both worlds. Get to play in New York, get to play with Juan Soto, get a ton of money up front, but also get to maybe maximize your earnings 2 or 3 years down the road by constantly resetting your market. And it would be Kyle Tucker betting on himself, right, in a big way by taking the 3-year deal. But this should put to bed any rumors about, like David Stearns not wanting to spend money. Like, this is just ridiculous. Like, today is the day where, okay, they put a $50 million offer in front of Kyle Tucker. They care about winning. I already saw it today. Somebody like, they are putting $50 million in front of Kyle Tucker, who's never won in New York, but they didn't want to give a 31-year-old Pete Alonso the money. If you don't see the difference between those two situations, you don't understand the current sport of baseball. You just don't.
Or like the types of players that those project to be long term. Like, Pete Alonso is an excellent power bat, and he was an excellent player in New York for that early part of his career, the first 8 years of his career with the Mets. But long term, a first baseman who's not a defensive guy, who's a power bat, that declines over time. And Lord knows Pete Alonso is not taking walks at the rate of a Juan Soto or a Kyle Tucker. And I mean, I think the argument that David Stearns and Steve Cohen weren't spending money should have been put to bed when they stole Juan Soto from the Yankees, to use Yankees terms for that transaction, by giving him 15 years with a 15 years with a $51 million AAV. And now they're willing to, once again, with the top bat on the market, as Soto was last year, Kyle Tucker is inarguably the best bat on the market in terms of his youth, in terms of his strike zone recognition, in terms of his ability to take walks, his ability to steal some bases, his ability to hit for power. He is the best bat on the market right now, and the Mets are willing to pay him $50 million a year, only $1 million a year less than they're paying Juan Soto, and $10 million a year more than the Yankees are paying Aaron Judge on his current contract. So I don't think there's any argument that the Mets are doing what they can to win. And I just love that this is the move that they're choosing to do, because we've been saying it all offseason, Chris. This is playing exactly into the Mets' hands, where the market doesn't pan out for some of the top guys on the market like the Bellingers and the Tuckers, where they're waiting things out to see if they can get a longer-term deal. But in the meantime, the Mets are standing there holding out $150 million in cash over the next 3 years and saying, hey, man, maybe you'll be able to get those longer-term deals. Maybe you'll be able to lock in more money over the long term. But in the next 3 years, you could be making $50 million a year. We have the highest AAV potential because of our rich owner. We have the ability to lock this in now before the CBA, before any potentially salary cap implications. You could take this money right now and not have to worry about the bird in the bush. Take the bird in the hand, the $150 million on the table, rather than hoping that longer term deal will come and you won't be missing out on any future money in a longer deal.
You said something about the Mets getting Soto last year and spending, $51 million AAV for him. If they pull this off and get Tucker on whatever term, 3 or 4 years, for 2 straight off seasons, the Mets will have gotten the best bat available.
Yes.
For 2 straight off seasons, the New York Mets will have gotten the top free agent offensive player in the sport. Like, that is something noteworthy. And I know people want to say, oh, Juan Soto was a Steve Cohen thing, not a David Stearns thing. All right. I don't agree with you, but okay. You if it happens 2 off seasons in a row, all of a sudden credit gets to start to be spread around a little bit to it being a collective philosophy of we are going to strike when the market gives us an opportunity to strike. Now, listen, he may end up signing with the Dodgers on a short-term medium AAV deal, right? The Dodgers may come in and say, we'll offer you 3 years, $45 million a season, and you get to play in LA for a team that's won back-to-back titles. The Mets, I don't know if they're going to be able to break that tie. I don't know if $15 million breaks that tie, right? Ronto may be offering, stupid amounts of money on a long-term deal, and Kyle Tucker feels very committed to setting the bar in that way with a long-term deal and locking in generational wealth. I don't know what Kyle Tucker is thinking. All I know is all offseason long, people wanted to try to connect the dots between the Mets and Kyle Tucker. And at every turn, I was like, I just don't know if I see it. It's not a good fit. I don't know where he plays. He is the best player, but it just feels like Bellinger's a more natural fit. He's going to cost less. That felt like the path the Mets were going to go down. And Tucker's name being floated around was just kind of a way to keep the bidding war going for Kyle Tucker to make more money. Today changed the equation a little bit that it leaked that the Mets offered him $50 million a season. Now, my question is, if the Mets offered $50 million a season and he has not taken the $50 million a season, that does concern me a little bit of where this may end up going.
Right.
Because 3-150 or 4-200 has been put in front of Kyle Tucker. If he's considering another offer, I don't know if the Mets can do better than that. They might. They might be able to go to 52, 53, 55.
I think there's a good chance, though, that if we're right and this was the Mets side leaking things, or even if we were wrong and it's Kyle Tucker's agent and they're trying to pump up the value, like that just might be what it is. Like, the Mets have their offer out in the open on the table, whatever you want to call it, 3 years, $150 million, or 4 years, $200 million. And maybe that means Kyle Tucker's shopping around and seeing, hey, Dodgers, are you willing to pay me this amount of money? Because Lord knows I'd rather play for the team that won back-to-back World Series and live in LA than maybe live in New York and have to deal with the team that missed the playoffs with Juan Soto last year. I don't know what the calculus is going on behind the scenes, but I know that the Mets offer right now seems to be in the thick of the competition to get Kyle Tucker to come to New York, to come to Queens specifically, and be a part of the team, because the AAV is just it has the potential to blow every other team out of the water. And again, it's $1 million a year less than Juan Soto is making. Kyle Tucker would be the 3rd highest paid player by AAV in MLB history, above Aaron Judge and right behind Juan Soto.
Do you think, and I don't know if this is factoring into their calculations, but do you think they won't go past Soto's 51?
I think there's a chance.
Do you think like they don't want to annoy Soto, who they just gave a massive contract to, by immediately the next offseason going above his AAV?
I think that's
I
like
don't know. Soto may not be bothered by that. Soto may not care.
right. I think that's a possibility and like something the Mets might be considering. But at the same time, I think it's a bit of an apples to oranges comparison where Juan Soto's getting that much money for 15 years. That's 5 times the amount of years on a potential Kyle Tucker deal from the Mets if what we're hearing is true. Like that is so much more money over a longer period of time, and the Mets have shown so much more faith in Juan Soto with that kind of long-term, extremely high AAV deal, and in my opinion, deservedly so. I think he's a top 3 hitter in baseball. Kyle Tucker making 50 million or 51 million or 52 million over a shorter term, I don't think should be something that Juan Soto is losing sleep over. When I think about in the NFL, we think about guys resetting the market when a new player becomes the new highest paid player at their position. Their mindset and a lot of their statements after they sign this contract is, I'm setting this up now to lay the groundwork for the receivers that come after me. So everyone who is going to get paid after I've gotten paid is going to look at my contract and say, I want to make more than that. And I think if the Mets and Juan Soto are on the same page about wanting to win and Kyle Tucker coming being a way for them to be closer to contending for a World Series, Juan Soto might be able to look at a shorter term, even if it's a higher AAV deal than what he has, deal and look at that and say, all right, I laid the foundation with my 51 million, and now Kyle Tucker is going to capitalize with maybe a little bit higher AAV, but a shorter term commitment from the Mets, and everyone wins. We're going to be a better team. We're going to win more games, hopefully, and contend for the World Series in 2026.
What's so interesting is by this leaking today, right? This shows the Mets are in. Like the Mets are in the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes. Before it was kind of on the fringes, not sure if they actually are in. They're being linked.
They're
now
in on Kyle Tucker.
Right, checked in on Kyle Tucker. Oh, they had a Zoom meeting with Kyle Tucker. Like, no, they now have decided Kyle Tucker is somebody who fits what we want to do in 2026 and beyond. Like, he is a fit for what we think this team needs. And this is where they flex the muscle. I'm going to continue to say it. Like, this is where if you need to go to 60, I think you go to 60 on a 3-year deal. Like, I think you go 180 and you just blow the doors off of everybody else if he's willing to take a short-term deal. Again, I don't know exactly what Toronto is offering, and that to me, more so than the Dodgers, is the thing that would worry me. Because if he takes the Dodgers deal, then it was always going to be about, competition and being able to put yourself in a position to win. And we said earlier this offseason, the Mets are not going to win that battle. Nobody is going to win that battle against the Dodgers. But if he is willing to take a short-term deal and he wants to maximize his earning potential, then the Mets will not lose to the Dodgers in this regard. Like they have identified Kyle Tucker as a guy. They will get their guy. Toronto worries me because they may be offering $35 to $40 million a season in an AAV, and they may be willing to go to 7 years. They may be willing to go to 8 years, and, is that the thing that sways Kyle Tucker? I don't know. But you got Ken Rosenthal this morning. It's funny how all of a sudden out of nowhere, this morning you hear the Mets offered 120 to 140 million. Then it became, nope, it was a $50 million AAV, and it's for 3 or 4 years. You got Ken Rosenthal saying it's going to happen this week or next week. Like we are getting towards the end here, and the Mets have just positioned themselves right in the thick of it, and you almost are at a point now where you're going to be disappointed if he goes someplace else because of how aggressive it appears the Mets are willing to be here, and you start dreaming of a middle of the lineup that's going to have Juan Soto and Kyle Tucker in it, and you think like that's exactly what this Mets offense was missing last year, and adding him to it would just be incredible.
And on a short-term deal, it plays so well into the market has played exactly into where the Mets wanted it to play into, where these guys, the long-term and high AAV deals that they're asking for are not materializing. We've seen it in some of the reporting about the Yankees and Cody Bellinger and how their deal is kind of in question. Their negotiations are not going super well because Bellinger wants a longer-term higher AAV. The Yankees aren't maybe willing to commit that many years. And the market is starting to shrink. The calendar is starting to run out of days before spring training starts. And the Mets have the pockets to dig into and pay out a massive AAV short-term deal on some of these players. And I think especially for Kyle Tucker, it could be a win-win for both sides, where again, Tucker's 28 years old. If he plays out all 3 years of a contract, and let's say there are even opt-outs before then, but even if he plays out all 3 years, he still is going to be able to hit the market again at 31 years old after, maybe betting on himself, but hopefully to great success in New York. and turning that into maybe a longer term 5-year high AAV contract and make more money on top of that. I think it just all goes back to what I was saying before about like the Mets are the bird in the hand, the 3 years, $150 million. You are not getting that much money per year from any other team that's in on the sweepstakes for Kyle Tucker. The bird in the
I mean, it's
bush
really down to
is maybe
three,
the Toronto Blue
right?
Jays. Sorry?
No, they're down to three teams. It's Dodgers, Blue Jays, or Mets, right? Like no one
Right,
else is
right.
jumping in here.
And I think the bird in the hand is the Mets, and the bird in the bush is maybe the Toronto Blue Jays, which is you're making maybe less money per year, but it's a higher value overall, and it's a longer term deal to make up for that. I think betting on yourself right now will ultimately allow Kyle Tucker to win in the long term if he projects to be the kind of player that, his first 7 years of his career projects him to be.
And again, I think there's a world where he can actually make more money by taking the short-term deal from the New York Mets and betting on himself and having three, great years, or even if it's 2 great years and opting out before he gets to the third year. I think if the Mets structure it in a way where, to me, I would make sure the opt-out's after 2. And maybe that's what they're haggling over, where they want the opt-out after year 1 and the Mets want, 2 years of certainty. But, even after an opt-out, I think there's a chance for Kyle Tucker to make even more than a 7 or 8 year deal right now would pay him, right? And I'm sure his agent and his team are going through what that may look like a couple years down the road, because the Mets, in order to make these short-term deals, worth it for the player, you have to almost go to a level that just is ridiculous so that they feel like on the back end, even if they take a quote-unquote pay cut in terms of AAV, they can make up the difference in what a long-term deal would have been. And again, he could sign $350 right now, and then he could sign a 5/150 in 3 seasons, and that's 8,300. And I don't think there's an 8,300 deal out there right now. Like, I don't think that's what Toronto is offering, because I think it would have been signed by now. So to me, and he's 31. Schwarber got that at 32. And I think Tucker is a player that you would much rather give the 5/150 to, because Schwarber's great, but Schwarber can't play the field, DH only, power bat. I know he doesn't strike out a ton, or he strikes out a ton. He walks a bunch as well. He's got good command of the strike zone.
Yep.
But it's just, he's not the overall player that Tucker is, who provides the defense and decent power and good contact and is an all-around player, where I think teams would feel really easy about giving 5/150 to Kyle Tucker at age 31, right? A couple years down the road. So that's the bet that they're going to try to figure out, and we'll see if the Mets ultimately pull this off.
And I'd almost argue that like the Mets are already reaching a level of kind of ridiculous blow Kyle Tucker out of the water when you look at, like, he'll be making $10 million a year more than Aaron Judge is on his current contract. Like, that is the level that the Mets are willing to go. And I think it goes back to what you said at the beginning of this episode, Chris, that the Mets have found their guy. They've locked in on Kyle Tucker as a guy that they think can really improve this roster, can really improve the pop in the lineup and make the Mets more of a contender. And as a result, they're willing to go essentially all in on this player in free agency and have a chance at, in back-to-back years, sniping the best free agent off of the market before or ahead of any other team.
Yeah, my last thing on this is I would love to see this go down, not only because I want Kyle Tucker to be a New York Met, and again, the fit's a little awkward, like who's playing left field, who's playing right field. We'll worry about that later. We get good players and then figure it out later. You have the DH spot also to worry about this. But I also would like to see this happen because it is a win for David Stearns and this philosophy, right? Like, it will validate some of the pain that we've gone through over the last couple of months for them to land Soto last year and then Tucker again this year. Like, it will be a way for David Stearns to kind of spike the football, and he'll never do it, right? Especially coming off a year where they won 83 games. But to spike the football in a way to say, hey, like, I told you I don't give out long-term deals unless it's an exception. I'm going to play the market, and I'm going to strike when the opportunity is there. This was an opportunity. We took it. We're always looking to make moves like this. We're going to continue to make moves like this. Like, this is what you can expect from the New York Mets. Like, I want to see one go through the hoop this way because, Sean Manaea 375 doesn't fall into this bucket. Devin Williams in the 3-year deal that he signed doesn't fall into this bucket. But this short-term, high AAV deal, the Mets don't have a shining example of like them doing this, even though they constantly talk about it. And it being Kyle Tucker, I think would be a huge home run.
100%, 100%. And again, like, adding a player of that caliber just to begin with is a massive win for David Stearns and the Mets because and to do it on such a short-term deal, like, it gives them an excellent player, one of the best 10 hitters in baseball over the last 5 years. just by, pure Fangraphs war. And then for a short-term deal that allows them the flexibility to continue the longer-term vision and the overall bigger picture philosophy of, we want to continue building up a farm system and a new core for the Mets that in the future we'll be able to build around that new core and make this team a contender for years to come, as the Dodgers have been able to do in the West. And I think the ability to bring in players that are of this caliber on those shorter term deals, like you said, Chris, is just a massive win for that kind of mindset of, we're in this to win now, but we're also keeping in mind the bigger picture philosophy of, there's a future here past Kyle Tucker. Once his contract is over, we have a vision for past 2028, 9, however long.
Yeah, it's just, I've never felt super confident that the Mets would land a big fish from the hitter department this offseason. But now it's starting to feel like there is a distinct possibility that they could land the biggest fish out there in Kyle Tucker. So we'll have to keep an eye on it here. The $50 million offers in front of Kyle Tucker. I think at this point, the Mets are just kind of waiting and seeing if he'll end up taking it. If you want to watch the Bleav in Mets pod, you can do so by heading over to our YouTube channel. Just search Jack McKessy, McKessy. If you're listening to us in the podcast feed, do us a favor, rate, review, subscribe to the show, share an episode, this one, a previous one that you've liked, with a fellow Mets fan. Help us grow this show into the 2026 season. We're back again later this week. Maybe Kyle Tucker will be a New York Met. Maybe we will still be waiting. You'll have to come on back and see if Kyle Tucker is a New York Met. We'll talk to you guys next time. And as always, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.